Hold a tireless work ethic, I guess. I got this chapter done as you were doing that introduction, so I really... My apologies beforehand. This is a chapter from my attempt at a novel entitled Evergreen. It'll be written under the pen name, as folks know that I often do pen names, under the name John Feinstraw. And I guess a bit of foretelling. If anyone know about the Boston molasses disaster?
Yes.
1919, perhaps one of the more bizarre disasters in U.S. history. A vat containing molasses, about 200,000 gallons, burst after a sudden rise in temperature in Boston. It went up about 40 degrees from one day to the next. And it wore on the metal. It was basically a cylindrical stress failure, and caused it to spill out onto several blocks of Boston, wiping out several city blocks. So, Agna woke up with the impression that she had been thrown into a portrait. The pain from the impact of the Model A still reverberated from her back outward, but the landscape around her sagged with the weight of copper and robust dark brown, and the vibrant chatter on the north end had given way to the snail's pace of groans, both metal and human. The smell struck her before any concrete image. It was overly sweet, an aroma that transformed into stench, an overkill. Before she could stand, she put her hand over her nose in an attempt to stifle the cloying odor, but she felt a viscous, warm splash across her face. Her arms had been drenched in the same treacle. Molasses, she thought. It smells like the bottle of Crosby's at Aunt Natalie's. Then the sameness of her vision took shape. There was the Model A, down commercial, on its side, door on the upside missing, and yet it was half buried in the ground. Stranger still, it was moving, not falling, but gliding as if it were being pushed down the street. And the road below bubbled and swirled, and next to it, a bicycle, half immersed in molasses, passed by, faster with its lesser resistance. The news wasn't any better down commercial. There was a firehouse on the north side of the street once. It still stood, but the building itself now lay further east, almost into the beach. The partially exposed foundation was a mass of blazed rubble. She stood and soon sank into the mass up to her shins. She looked to the epicenter of the wreck. There were forms struggling in the mire. In some instances, it was hard to tell what was struggling. Ahead of her, the Atlantic Avenue elevated rail shifted. The steel girders popped, straining under its own twisted weight. The failure of the rivets sounded like machine gun fire. And there is Amiens again. Declan had told her that they would take the ferry from Rose Wharf via the Atlantic L. "Declan?" she yelled out. The sound of her own voice made her wince, and the ringing of her shout rattled deep into her head. Stumbling through the mass, she kept her balance against the storefront. The cracked front window offered several identical reflections. The larger one gave her pause. The reflected light seared her vision, but not before she saw her eyes, so dilated that they almost took up as much area as the irises. She would have to check into a hospital. Eventually. "Declan?" she yelled again. The ringing was less severe, but still enough to stop her in mid-step. And in the midst of all the copper and dark brown, she spotted a sliver of violet, not 30 feet from her, amidst a small hill of molasses, as large as a man. Almost falling over in the race to reach him, Agnes swiped away the molasses around his face. She saw no blood, no immediate signs of trauma. His mouth was closed, and when she opened it, there was no debris, no molasses. And he still wasn't breathing. She reached for his arms. If he had been struck, it was probably too late, but if it was an obstruction, she could still try the Sylvester method. She lifted the wrists and crossed them against his chest. "Not today, Declan," she whispered as she rocked forward, pushed his arms into his body. She quickly held the arms out and up, and then pressed him back in. She counted 5 to 6 seconds in each repetition. Major McDonald had said 12 to 6 repetitions should do it per minute. Should. She lost count of the repetitions after 50. She lost track of her words to him well before that. "He's gone," said the nowhere voice. Its voice doesn't reverberate, she thought. "Find who you're supposed to." She lifted Declan's arms again. "He is dead," said the nowhere voice again, without a trace of pity, but with more than a taste of impatience. "You have less than 2 minutes. He will drop from the gray and into the gray. Find him." She looked down. Declan's eyes remained closed, his head, his body, and no blood. The light screams of a child rose above the murky flowing mass. It wasn't coming from the new river that snaked down commercial. It was above the din. It was coming from the elevated tracks. It was coming from a tiny red coat and black slacks, flailing from a metal outreach in the girder next to the derailed L car. As she raced toward him, the molasses swirled the dark hues out and became clear as water. The buildings rearranged, turned to snapped mooring masts and shattered piers. Then the new water spun red with blood. The sickly sweet smell turned into the essences of an ocean, then turned into the fragrance of the forest, of pine and gunpowder. Fire stations split themselves apart into perforated trees, then into the remnants of a factory instantly transformed into history. Boston became Halifax. Halifax became Amiens. Smells and sounds slid at their own speeds, blending through cities, borders, boundaries, and time. Only two constants in disasters. Rubble. Whatever the country, the architecture, the ambition, rubble is rubble. Whatever the bullet, the explosion, or the accident, destruction speaks the same. The other constant was the boy in the center, hanging by his fingernails above the outstretched steel nest of the girders. She stepped out of the molasses into the hill of metal as the boy lost his grip. As she leapt, she heard her internal voice plead, "Whether I catch him or not, please end me. Let me hit the steel instead." She felt his weight crunch against her and her force pushing them both off the hill, and then the more forgiving floor of the mass. First she felt her remaining breath knocked out by the impact, and then she heard crying. From her side, she saw the boy on all fours, rising to his feet, shouting for anyone who could hear. And then a second, this one more familiar, coming from within. "Miss?" she heard from the north. "Miss, are you all right? Are you able to stand?" At this point, questions make no sense. Questions demand responses. She had no response for why Declan was gone. She had no responses for why the knower voice was now silent, didn't even acknowledge that the job was done. She could only lie on her back, whispering, "No more, please. I can't do this."
Okay.